She escaped, but her twin didn't. If you think the truth always comes to light, you've never heard this story. Subscribe, and let's begin. The road to Kapalua slices the island with hairpin turns and sheer drops. On a humid July night in 2016, headlights faltered at a cliff's lip. Sirens came later, emergency lights turned volcanic rock into a stage. A dark sedan teetered over the edge, rear end smashed, smoke curling from a ruptured tailpipe. Below, the ocean took the moonlight. Under a tarp lay Anastasia Duval, 28. Beside her, coughing and hollow-eyed, was her twin Alexandria, blood on a sleeve, shock in her voice. Witnesses' shorthand offered fragments. They were fighting. She grabbed the wheel. The island stitched those fragments into a tidy story overnight. Alexandria's first words to medics were a desperate, jagged plea. She grabbed the wheel. She wouldn't let go. In interrogation she said more measured things. We argued. I tried to stop her. Detectives would later learn that the Duval sisters had always been mirror halves, Anastasia the risk-taker, Alexandria the tether. Childhood photos showed matching grins, private texts, recovered under warrant, read like emotional entanglement. The prosecution wanted a neat arc: jealousy, shove, death. Social feed supplied outrage. Detective Lydia Harper, who'd spent years separating grief from fact, refused simple answers. She crouched at the car's crushed trunk and found ordinary things: sunscreen, a motel card, a lipstick, and, wrapped in tape, an action camera. Its SD card was missing. Autopsy notes read bluntly, blunt force trauma, immediate death, but they also hinted at questions. Anastasia's hands bore bruises, as if she'd gripped something tight. The me scribbled an odd line, a faint patterned mark on the inside of her wrist, possibly deliberate. No foreign DNA flagged in prelims. Forensic footwear analysts later described a single set of adult shoe prints along the shoulder of the road, leading away from the crash and toward a thicket, prints too defined to be accidental. 2 days after the crash, county prosecutors filed charges against Alexandria, second-degree murder. Headlines sharpened. The arraignment photo, Alexandria, hollow-eyed, flanked by officers, sealed a public narrative, one sister accused of killing the other. Defense lawyers smelled a rushed job. Family lawyers smelled injustice. The community smelled resolution. Then lab techs called. The SD card, the camera's missing heart, had been found taped under the driver's seat. The single 32-second clip would tilt the story's axis. They watched it under dim light. The camera sat low, angled toward the car interior. For almost half a minute, the footage was ordinary: dashboard glow, fingers crossing the frame, a shared laugh that sounded like relief. Anastasia's voice, close to the mic, said, "You can't keep choosing me to die for you." She looked at the camera as if confessing to an unseen judge. Alexandria answered, patient and weary. Through the passenger window a figure moved along the road shoulder, a silhouette, purposeful, headed straight for the car. The sequence collapsed into a blur, a thump against metal, heavy breathing into the mic, a door opening, voices spiking. The clip ended as the headlights tipped toward the cliff. The last frame was static: 2 sisters, a shadow approaching, and a whole courtroom's worth of assumptions collapsing. How did that get missed? Harper asked. Either it was hidden on purpose, or someone knew what they were doing, the tech said. Neither answer made the story cleaner. The video did what bureaucracy could not: it complicated motive. The narrative that Alexandria had pushed her twin in a jealous rage now had rival possibilities. Perhaps the silhouette was a stranger with a grudge. Perhaps it was a lover. Perhaps Anastasia had invited someone. Or perhaps, with the awful logic of codependence, Anastasia engineered a scene to end both their lives, or to test who would choose whom. Outside the station, Kapalua's palm trees stood polite and unmoved. Inside, Harper drafted subpoenas and called family in Houston. The Duval parents were a portrait of mineralized grief on the other end of the line, numb, demanding, and primed to hate or forgive without pause. On social media, theories blossomed: murder, suicide, accident, insurance fraud. Everyone wanted the clean villain. Harper watched the frame of the silhouette again. It had been captured by a camera nobody expected to matter, a witness that had not yet spoken. The case would now chase that shadow. Whoever it belonged to would either explain the final minutes or vanish and leave truth to rumor. Public reaction hardened. A surviving twin charged with murder made tidy headlines and late-night speculation. Alexandria's attorney vowed to dismantle the theory. Prosecutors assembled evidence, texts, witness statements, a history that looked damning on paper. Harper moved between the forensic and the human. He ordered cell tower pings, checked surf shops for GoPro, and ran a lobby log showing a visitor. At the Duval home in Houston, relatives argued over truth. A childhood friend gave Harper a home video where two small girls in matching dresses whispered secrets. If one fell, the other felt it, the friend said. The line stayed with him. Forensic techs dusted the shoulder and found more than prints, a cigarette butt, a smear on the guardrail, and tire impressions suggesting a vehicle had parked there before the crash. Those traces argued for another presence. Harper replayed Anastasia's words until they felt raw. Who had she been speaking to, the camera, her sister, or the figure walking toward them? The SD card handed them a shadow that could pin a story or dissolve under scrutiny. Harper wrote one line on board: find the shadow. Detective Lydia Harper replayed the 32 seconds until the images blurred. The clip complicated the neat story the island wanted, and then the case began to unspool when evidence disappeared. The motel surveillance had a hole for the hour the Duval sisters checked in. The roadside camera near the cliff returned only static. The SD card Malik Reyes recovered arrived with its timestamp scrubbed. An anonymous login hit the lab server at 2:13 a.m., the IP traced to a cash-paid terminal on Front Street. 2 nights after he handed over the card, Malik's pickup was found abandoned, doors open, glove compartment rifled. He stopped answering calls. The custody log showed an extra entry that night. The shop owner at Front Street remembered a stranger buying batteries and asking about action cameras. No name. No face. Marco Reyes, Anastasia's volatile ex, left the island less than a day after the crash. His credit card trail grew patchy, his phone pinged towers for a short stretch, then went dark. His flight manifest later showed his name blanked in some copies. Reasons were bureaucratic until they felt like avoidance. Text messages on Anastasia's phone mentioned someone named D. Subpoenas routed that initial to Eleanor Crow, the Duval's Houston attorney. Eleanor handled trusts, insurance, and a recent beneficiary change that named Alexandria contingent on a family trust. Legal adjustments do not equal murder, but they shape motive in a courtroom. Partial traces deepened the mystery. A cigarette butt by the guardrail produced a partial DNA profile that matched no statewide file. Shoe impressions matched a single tread. Tire marks suggested another vehicle had parked before the crash. The lab's logs were messy, CCTV archives overwritten, motel ledgers with cash payments no one claimed. Officer Jason Malloy, Harper's partner for 4 years, had always been steady. His radio log and time card seemed to clear him, until a grainy still from a gas station camera surfaced. It showed Malloy in uniform leaning into a sedan at 11:48 p.m., then walking away without his jacket. In a chrome reflection a badge number blinked. The frame had lived on a backup until Malik's disappearance. Malloy's patrol GPS recorded a 10-mile gap that night where the transponder lost signal. He told dispatch he'd been tied up downtown, no business would vouch for him. His locker later was found compromised, an evidence key missing. Malloy insisted he had nothing to hide, but his answers had the brittle ring of evasion. Malik's sister forwarded Harper a frantic voicemail in which Malik whispered Malloy's name and said, "He said it'll be quiet." The message cut off. Malloy's phone records showed a short call to Malik the night the tech vanished. Malloy claimed it was a routine check-in. The lab produced a small, worrying correlation. Partial markers from the cigarette matched markers present in Malloy's family profile in an internal database, not a full match, but enough to spark suspicion. The department's internal logs showed anonymous overnight access to evidence terminals. CCTV backups had been partially overwritten. Someone with knowledge and access was pruning the trail. Pressure mounted from the press and prosecutors. The Duval parents demanded answers. Social feeds simplified the sisters' lives into motive and blame. Harper resisted tidy narratives and followed irregularities instead, who benefited from an insurance tweak, who had motive to shape a story, who could credibly scrub digital footprints. A receipt from a Kapalua surf shop showed a cash purchase of camera batteries 2 days before the crash. The rental account on the ledger resolved to a seasonal guest room tied to a trust the Duvals used. The cash trail threaded back to a name Harper had seen, Eleanor Crow. The attorney had means to authorize recent financial changes, and access to records that could explain the odd beneficiary language. She became a figure of interest, not for malice but for proximity. The spiral tightened when Harper found a tiny action camera battery in Malloy's locker during a late audit. It was wrapped in Kapalua surf and dive paper and matched the shop receipt. The battery had been placed where it could be discovered, it still held a faint warmth. Someone wanted Malloy linked. Malloy met Harper beneath sodium lights, ranged and white-eyed. "You think I'm involved?" he asked. "You're hiding something," Harper said. "I was there. I pulled up and called it in. My unit lost signal. That's all." His voice trembled. Against him, the transponder gap, the badge reflection, the missing key, the voicemail from Malik. The precinct felt watched. Anonymous flyers smeared Harper as a shield for Malloy. Someone keyed traitor on her car. An unknown photographer left a framed shot of the sisters on her desk marked liar. The campaign was small and precise, it meant someone was willing to steer public anger. Then Malik's last forwarded text arrived, "If anything happens to me, look at Jason." Harper read it until the sentence frayed. She had to reconcile a partner's face with a ledger of erasures, deleted footage, anonymous logins, a vanished technician, a flight out of the country, a partial DNA link, and a locker containing a battery that tied a trusted officer to the scene. Harper set a plan in motion. She would not arrest her partner on rumor. She secured a warrant for Malloy's unit and requested forensic imaging of his patrol car while keeping the application sealed from public view. She asked an outside analyst to reconstruct Malik's deleted logs. She placed anonymous markers in the server to trap whoever tried to alter files. Every move had to be surgical, trust had become evidence, and evidence had to be preserved before it could be poisoned. Harper sifted files and uncovered a frame she had not seen before, sent from an unmarked address, the Duval sedan, headlights tilting toward the cliff. In the rear-view shimmer, a reflection made her stomach drop. It was Malloy, his profile caught twice in a place he claimed not to have been. The email caption read, "Betrayal." Detective Lydia Harper had built a case out of ragged things, a battery, a voicemail, a transponder gap, and now she had to turn raggedness into reckoning. The precinct smelled of coffee and quiet fury as she walked into the evidence room with a sealed warrant and a small team. Outside, Kapalua's palms cut a steady silhouette against dawn, inside, time compressed. Malloy's confession was a slow thing, the sort of unraveling that begins with a small, honest admission and ends with a man who cannot say which lie saved him. He admitted to deleting backups, to accessing the lab after hours, to planting the battery in his locker. He refused, until the end, to say he had anything to do with Anastasia's death. "I panicked," he told Harper. "I was trying to protect myself. Malik had footage that, it would have ruined me. I didn't want him getting that to the papers. I didn't want to be on front pages for sleeping with a suspect. I never pushed her. I never." Harper watched him search for absolution in the face of a detective who had once called him partner. His hands trembled on the stainless table. "You broke evidence," she said simply. "You altered the scene." "I know." He looked older than his years. "I thought if I could bury it, we'd finish the case. One way or another, we'd find the truth without it leaking. I was trying to protect Alexandria. God, Lydia, I thought I could fix it." What Malloy could not stop was the ripple his tampering had begun. The team moved through the digital graveyard he'd tried to make. Forensic reconstructors worked like surgeons. One of them, a woman named Priya, called Harper at 3:12 a.m. with the kind of voice that means you should sit down. "We found an automated offload," she said. "A backup. It's raw. It's long." They gathered in a dim conference room. The screen filled with a wide-angle feed, the interior of the Duval sedan as the world had not seen it. It was longer than 32 seconds. It began with laughter and exhaustion, then words, then a shift that felt like the moment air changes at the edge of a storm. Anastasia tilted to the camera and spoke into the small microphone, but not as a confessional this time. She was candid, bright with a kind of dangerous, bitter humor. "You always think you can save me," she said. "But you don't know how to let go." Alexandria's face was a map of fatigue and concern. She reached over to steady her sister's knee. The stereo played a tinny island hit, "The Night Wrapped Them." Outside, headlights carved a thin knife of light across the road shoulder. Then a figure appeared in the passenger window's reflection, at first indistinct, then clear as a bruise. The man who walked toward the car was Marco Reyes. He moved fast, a hard set to his shoulders. He leaned, he spoke. His voice, when Priya enhanced the audio and isolated it, was rough and slurred with something like apology or menace. "You sure you want to do this here?" he said. The clip made him sound small and enormous at once. What followed was not a tidy crime theater moment but the messy, human symmetry of a fight. Anastasia slapped at Marco's arm, he shoved, Alexandria stood up to pull them apart. At one point, the footage caught Anastasia's hand sliding toward the wheel, not to steer but to lock. Her fingers closed around the steering column the way someone pressing a button can seal a fate. She looked at Alexandria and the camera as if making a calculation. "If you won't choose, I will," she said, audibly, to no one and to everyone. The car lurched. Metal groaned. The camera clattered. The last full sequence, a tangle of arms, a shout, and the headlights angling toward the cliff, played out in a fragmented chorus of images and sounds that, pieced together, told the kind of truth courts love to simplify but life refuses to make neat. When the recording ended, the room sat in a silence built from small, terrible facts. Anastasia had not been a passive victim. She had been the engine of the moment, reckless in a way that no single motive could justify. Marco's presence explained the footprints by the guardrail, his flight explained the airline blanks, his adrenaline and alcohol fed an argument that turned catastrophic. Malik's disappearance fit into the edges of the picture differently now. He had been trying to sell the longer file to a tabloid, and in doing so he'd made himself a target. Someone had frightened him enough to leave town. Malik's truck had been found, emptied, his last messages were a knot of worry about being followed. The prosecutorial narrative shifted. With Marco located, a tip from a fisherman who recognized him at a marina 40 miles away, police moved faster than the press. Marco fought as men do when they are frightened, with the reflex of survival. He told a version of the night that tried to cast Anastasia as instigator and himself as stumbling participant. In court, under cross, he admitted to being there but denied intending harm. The judge allowed the evidence, the full footage, Malik's notes, Malloy's tampering, and the timeline that mapped what each person had been doing in the minutes before the drop. Alexandria, who had watched the footage once with Harper and then again with her lawyer, made a choice people rarely have to make under such glare. She pleaded for truth, not vengeance. Her testimony was spare, honest in the ways that wound. She described a sister she loved who had become someone she could no longer recognize, a woman who had dialed her own end with a kind of theatrical cruelty. "She looked at me like she was daring me to stop her," Alexandria said. "I tried." The court cleared Alexandria of murder charges. It did not clear her of grief, nor of the unwordable guilt that replaced what the public called blame. Malloy was indicted for evidence tampering and obstruction, his career unraveled in hearings that played out like an ignoble fall. Malik's fate remained a knot, traced to a payment, a name, an empty motel room, but new leads surfaced and the case reopened. Someone in a coastal town remembered a man who had been frightened out of sleep and left. Eleanor Crow's role proved to be a different kind of moral stain. She had not killed anyone. What she had done was legalist work for money, restructured trusts, counseled the family in ways that sometimes blurred influence with advice, and, in a final, damning reveal, she had arranged a quiet payout to keep a scandal from spilling into the public. She testified about greed and cynicism but not violence. The courtroom left her reputation scuffed but her freedom intact. When the gavel finally came down on the last of the charges adjudicated in that first sweep, Harper stood at the back of the court and watched Alexandria walk out into a sunlight that felt both small and enormous. Cameras clicked. People speculated. The tabloids tried to stitch a villain from the seams. The truth, however, sat in the corners like dust. It was partial and jagged and would not be neatly curated. In the weeks that followed, Harper replayed the footage sometimes in the quiet of her car after a long day. She thought about the human choices that lead to catastrophe: a lover who showed up drunk, a sister who could not bear to be abandoned, a partner who panicked and tried to erase what he feared, a tech who vanished with a memory card. She thought about how truth rarely arrives as a clean thing. It arrives as shards that the living must hold in their hands and try, clumsily, to refit. On a late evening, months after the trial, Alexandria visited the cliff in private. She stood where the ocean takes light and the night presses like paper. She talked into the wind the way some people talk into graves, not to call the dead back but to set down what remained heavy. If you think this story was intense, wait till you hear the next one. Subscribe so you don't miss it.